So we have a day zero action that will trigger a multi-machine blueprint deployment. So we will actually create a multi-machine with a workflow stub. So the out-of-the-box thing will do the creation of the logical switches. It's a 3-tier application. It will deploy the virtual machine. It will deploy the edge, configure as a load balancer. So all these components will be created by the out-of-the-box integration. We will also configure the security groups and firewall components. Then we have a workflow stub that will do some things. And specifically, there is a pre-provisioning workflow stub that will configure some parameters such as the host files and the VMs to allow the web servers to know about the app servers and the app servers to know about the DB servers. And then we will configure like the load balancer persistence and other parameters such as the edge syslog. And these are not part of the out-of-the-box workflow, but what you will see as a user is an integrated experience, so we'll have the ability to specify the syslog and persistent from a user perspective, and that will actually do that in the post-provisioning cycle. But from a user perspective, you notice no difference. Then we'll have a day 2 action, which is change network and security configuration, so we'll have our item being deployed. We'll change our network and security configuration, and we will be able to add additional services like add and remove load balancer services or change security, like adding new ports or removing ports, changing persistence. And so what will happen is that the workflow will run and change the edge configuration and the firewall configuration accordingly, and it's the user that decides how you want to change that. So let's go to the demo.
Okay, so now we're going to show you this in action. So we're going to show first an example of that day 0 extensibility and how you can configure additional parameters in your multi-machine blueprint that are selectable at request time by the end user that will trigger extensibility options. So we'll go straight to our multi-machine blueprint in vRealize Automation.
Just a little bit of demo effect, of course. It will eventually show up. You had a joke for this moment, right?
Yeah, I'm still thinking of it. No, note to self that
Here we go.
we always have to cache the VRA web pages before we run a demo. Good thing to realize right now. Okay, so here are our blueprints. And you can see we have a number of custom properties and build profiles. So this shows us that we have the workflow stub, which workflow stubs we're hooking into, and some additional build profiles so we can inherit custom properties that will run an NSX configuration. So this is where we're going to essentially notify our multi-tier application about the other components, tell the web servers the IP address of the app servers and vice versa. And then here are the properties for the additional NSX parameters, like enabling HA, load balancer persistence, and syslog. And so now we're going to actually provision one of our multi-machine blueprints, so provision a service, and show how we can surface these options to the end user directly in the self-service catalog.
So we're asking for 2 web servers, 1 app server, and 1 DB server. And here are the options and how they look like.
So these could either be defined in the blueprint and fixed, or we could make them available and selectable by the end user. We have that the flexibility to do both. And so we're going to kick off this request. And then while this is running, we'll show you an example of the day 2 extensibility as well. All right, submit is where you always cross your fingers and hope for the green tick. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to let that provision, and then we'll come back to that. And then what we'll do is we'll actually show you an example of that exact same blueprint that we provisioned earlier and how we can make changes after the fact. And so for those of you who know the integration, it does have a rich set of capabilities at provisioning time. But one of the things that, out of the box, there are limits on once you've deployed the blueprint, how can you make changes to it in a self-service manner? And we're going to demonstrate exactly how this integration can enable that. So we have our 0.1 multi-machine service here that's configured, and we've added some additional actions that we'll call Advanced Service Designer. So
specifically, this one is pulling the runtime properties of this machine, so that's why now it's taking a few seconds. And so it's reading the configuration of the custom properties of this deployment. And we'll show you some actions based on that values.
Yeah, so the goal here actually for this request, we realized that if you can template your application, configure the required load balancing parameters, the security policy, that's great. But what happens if your users spin up another service on their application? Well, we want a self-service way to be able to, for example, enable now load balancing and open the firewall ports for that application on the new port. So here we have actually pre-approved ports for load balancing and firewalling that we allow the application owner to open up. So we're saying they can also allow access to port 80. And this one, given it's pre-approved, does not require any approval workflows as well. So they can do this as required. And then as an example, we also have another option for advanced settings. Do you want to show that?
Just wanted to show the runtime. So we are now running a VRO workflow as we speak that is doing the configuration changes. While this runs, let's go back.
Yeah, so this is an example of where this is not a pre-approved configuration. So someone can add any of the required ports that they want, a non-standard application to run on. So they can enter in any ports, and this would trigger an approval workflow, for example, so that the IT department has to say, yeah, that looks okay. We approve that request, and then we'll go and provision the required load balancer VIPs and changes to the security policy. So you can see we get this flexibility now as well in day 2 of actually modifying our NSX configuration.
So the workflow has completed.
So now we're in the NSX plugin in the vSphere web client, and we made those changes on the multi-machine service that was already deployed. We have an edge that's already configured. So actually, if we look at pool 1, so you can see that port 443 was part of the multi-machine blueprint. That was the default configuration. And then our additional day 2 operation added pool 2 and enabled services on port 80. So that extends to the load balancer VIP as well, and to the firewall configuration. And actually, you can see that edge down the bottom was the request that we kicked off. So it's going through the standard machine lifecycle. So you can see a new security policy containing the web VMs in our multi-machine service, so that we've also enabled, in addition to the port 443 access that was in the blueprint, we've enabled dynamically enabled access to a new port as well.
Actually reach the VMs.
Might as well test to see if it actually works, right?
So this is the original service.
So this is our 443, where our web server is communicating with the app server and retrieving information from the database in real time. And then our application owner enabled an additional service on port 80, which you can see is just a test page here. So Prior to running that workflow, this service was not accessible because it wasn't part of the multi-machine blueprint configuration.
Correct. We can also directly reach the web servers if we want, as the security policy allows that, because we configured that. So in the meantime, you will see there are actions going on. I don't think we have time to reach the end, but you see that there are actions going on. So new logical switches are being created, and a new NSX edge is being deployed, and virtual machines are being cloned by the workflow that we triggered at the beginning.
So what we can do, let's actually move on, and we can come back to this at the end if we have time.